tissue, which is one of the very important endocrine glands, which has got its effects on almost all the systems like CNS, cardiovascular system, autonomic nervous system, skeletal system, gastrointestinal system, reproductive system, and functions like growth and metabolism. Here in this diagram, we can see the surgical anatomy of thyroid. It is present in front of the neck, in front of thyroid cartilage. It is a butterfly-shaped gland having two lobes, right and left, and both the lobes are connected in the center by isthmus, which is lying at the level of second, third, and fourth tracheal rings. The gland is enclosed by pretracheal fascia, which is a part of deep cervical fascia. Gland weighs 20 to 25 grams, and the functioning unit of the gland is a lobule, which contains 24 to 40 follicles. Each lobule is supplied by single arteriole, and the follicles are lined by cuboidal epithelium. They contain colloid in which thyroglobulin is stored. Arterial supply of the thyroid. Thyroid has a rich arterial supply. The main thyroid artery and branches of the tracheal and esophageal arteries anastomose extensively. In this diagram, you can see that superior thyroid artery, which is a branch of external carotid artery, inferior thyroid artery, which is a branch of thyroglossal trunk, and thyroidema artery. Here in this diagram, we can see the venous drainage of thyroid. Superior thyroid vein, mid thyroid vein, inferior thyroid vein, and Cocker's vein. These are the four veins which drain the thyroid. Amongst them, superior thyroid vein, middle thyroid vein, and vein of Cocker, they drain in internal jugular vein, which in turn drains in left brachiocephalic vein. Then inferior thyroid vein directly drains in left brachiocephalic vein. Lymphatic drainage. The subcapsular plexus of the thyroid gland, they drain in juxta thyroid nodes, which include pretracheal, that is delphic nodes, paratracheal nodes, and nodes on the superior and inferior thyroid veins. Ultimately, all these nodes, they drain in deep cervical nodes and mediastinal group of nodes. Nerves which are in relation to thyroid. There are mainly two nerves. One is external laryngeal nerve and second is recurrent laryngeal nerve. Development of the thyroglossal duct. As you know that it develops from the median bud of the pharynx. Foramen cecum at the base of the tongue is the vestigial remnant of the duct. This initially hollow structure migrates caudally and passes in close continuity with the developing hyoid cartilage. Each developing lobe amalgamates with the ultimobranchial body, which arises from the diverticulum of the fourth pharyngeal pouch of each side. Parafollicular cells, which are the C cells from the neural crest, they reach the thyroid via the ultimobranchial body. Ectopic thyroid tissue and the anomalies of the thyroglossal tract. In 50% of the individuals, you can get a pyramidal lobe, which is a residual tissue of the thyroid along the course of the thyroglossal duct. Then lingual thyroid forms a rounded swelling at the back of the tongue at foramen cecum. This can be the only functioning thyroid tissue in the body. Next anomaly is median thyroglossal ectopic thyroid. This forms a swelling in the upper part of the neck and is usually mistaken for thyroglossal cyst. From this diagram, you can see that this median thyroglossal ectopic thyroid appears just like a thyroglossal cyst. Then thyroglossal cyst is again one of the very important congenital lesion. This is a congenital condition definitely, embryonic remnant along the course of the thyroglossal duct. It may be present in any part of the thyroglossal duct. And the important point as far as thyroglossal cyst is concerned, when it gets infected, that can be mistaken as a abscess, and sometimes that can be incised in an attempt to drain the abscess, which leaves behind thyroglossal fistula. Common lesions in order of the frequency of thyroglossal cyst are beneath the hyoid, in the region of the hyoid cartilage, and above the hyoid bone. Let us come to another anomaly or lesion of the thyroid, that is thyroglossal fistula. It is always an acquired condition, as I have already told you that it can result as an incision of the infected thyroglossal cyst mistaken for thyroid abscess. When the thyroid cyst is incompletely excised, that will keep behind the thyroglossal fistula. An infected thyroglossal cyst, if it bursts on its own, it can leave behind the thyroglossal fistula. So this is an acquired condition. It is a result of infected thyroglossal cyst, result of incomplete excision of the cyst, and cutaneous opening, which you can see in the neck. This cutaneous opening of the fistula is drawn upwards on protrusion of the tongue as well as on swallowing. Let me tell you, the students, that this is the difference between thyroid swelling and thyroglossal fistula and thyroglossal cyst, which is always asked in your practical examination. Thyroglossal cyst and fistula, they will move upwards with swallowing as well as with the protrusion of the tongue because of its connection at the foramen cecum. In contrast to this, thyroid swelling will move on swallowing only, and it will not move on protrusion of the tongue. This is lined by columnar epithelium. It discharges mucus. It is a seat of recurrent infection. Treatment: central part must be excised together with the cyst or fistula upwards towards the foramen cecum. Physiology of thyroid hormones. How the thyroid hormones are synthesized and what are the various steps. There are two main thyroid hormones, as you all know. One is triiodothyronine, that is T3, and second is tetraiodothyronine, that is levothyroxine or T4. They are bound to thyroglobulin within the colloid. Steps in the synthesis of the hormones. First step is trapping of the inorganic iodide from the blood. Second step is oxidation of iodide to iodine. Third step is binding of iodine with tyrosine to form iodotyrosinase. Next step is coupling of monoiodotyrosines and diiodotyrosines to form T3 and T4. When hormones are required, the complex is reabsorbed into the cell and thyroglobulin is broken down. Then T3 and T4 are liberated and enter the blood. They bind to serum proteins like albumin, thyroxine binding globulin, TBG, thyroxine binding prealbumin, TBPA, and the small amount of hormones that remain free in the serum is biologically active. There is a very well-known pituitary thyroid axis or negative feedback mechanism. Synthesis and liberation of thyroid hormones from the thyroid is controlled by TSH from the anterior pituitary. Secretion of TSH depends upon the levels of circulating thyroid hormone and is regulated in the classic negative feedback mechanism. With this chart, you can see that hypothalamus, which secretes TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone, which in turn acts on the anterior pituitary, and anterior pituitary secretes thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid follicles to secrete T3 and T4. Naturally, I want to tell this to the students because it is commonly seen that in spite of teaching, there is a permanent confusion and misunderstanding. See, when we say that the levels of the circulating T3 and T4 are more than normal, there is a message to the hypothalamus, and in return, TSH is secreted less so that T3 T4 secretion is reduced. So, in hyperthyroidism, TSH levels will be low, and in contrast to this, in hypothyroidism, because the circulating levels of T3 and T4 are less, there is a message through this uh, pituitary hypothalamus axis, and more TSH is sent, and it will the levels of the TSH will be seen more in hypothyroid patients. There are thyroid receptor antibodies. A family of IgG immunoglobulins bind with TSH receptor sites and activate TSH receptors in the follicular cell membrane. They have more powerful action than TSH and are responsible for virtually all the cases of thyrotoxicity. Let us see the investigations which are specific in case of thyroid. There is one group, they are serum thyroid hormones. Or in thyroid function test, we include TSH, T3 and T4. This TSH is ultra sensitive TSH, and more accurate levels of T3, T4, which is free T3, T4, will be more sensitive and more useful for clinical assessment. Serum TSH can be measured accurately down to very low serum concentrations with an immunochemy lumiноmetric assay. Normal range is 0.3 to 5 micro international unit. T3 and T4 levels are the metabolic effects of thyroid hormones are due to unbound T3 and T4. T3 is more important physiological hormone which is also produced in the periphery by conversion of T4 to T3. The normal range is for T3 it is 86 to 187 nanograms per dl. For T4 it is 4.5 to 12.5 micrograms per dl, that is deciliter 100 ml. We see that T4 is more effective. You get the result and response within a very short period of time, that is within hours. But the effect goes off very early. That is why you have to give the dose of T3 thrice in a day. Uh, Contrary to that, T4 is long acting. It takes more time to get the effect, that is days, 4 to 14 days. And that is why a single OD dose is enough uh, for per day. There are other hormones in relation with thyroid. Actually, they are not included in thyroid function tests, but their relation to various thyroid conditions needs to be considered. Amongst them, one is serum creatinine. It is increased in hyperthyroidism and decreased in hypothyroidism. Second is serum cholesterol. In a patient of thyroid, it is observed that serum cholesterol levels are increased in hypothyroidism and decreased in hyperthyroidism. Maybe because of the slowed metabolic rate in hypothyroidism, they are increased, and increased metabolic rate in hyperthyroidism, they are decreased. Third hormone is serum calcitonin. The primary role of serum calcitonin is to decrease the levels of the calcium. You will find increased levels in medullary carcinoma of the thyroid. So if at all you are suspecting any thyroid swelling to be because of the carcinoma, and if you get the raised levels of the serum calcitonin, you can suspect it. Next hormone is thyroid autoantibodies levels. Serum levels of antibodies against thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin are useful in demonstrating the cause of thyroid dysfunction and swelling. So far, 4 autoantigens have been detected. They are for thyroglobulin, thyroid cell microsomes, nuclear component, thyroglobulin colloid. Another investigation is isotope scanning. It is based on the principle that uptake by thyroid on a low dose of either radio-labeled iodine, that is iodine 123, or technetium, which is normally taken up like iodine 123, will demonstrate the distribution of activity in the whole gland. But the fallacy is this isotope scanning is not useful in distinguishing between the benign and malignant lesion. Another important investigation is fine needle aspiration cytology. It is mandatory for all the palpable discrete swellings or nodules. Then another investigation which may be of any use is X-ray chest and X-ray thoracic inlet for tracheal deviation. Of course, routine investigations as are carried out in any other case like hemoglobin, routine urine examination, blood grouping, RH typing, blood sugar level, serum creatinine, HIV, and of course, in today's scenario, corona test. Let us see the classification of thyroid swellings. There are various types of swellings can be seen in a region of thyroid related to thyroid. One is simple goiter. It means it is a euthyroid goiter where there is no change in the thyroid hormone levels. Second is toxic goiter. Third is neoplastic swellings. Fourth is inflammatory swellings. And next is other swellings. Let us see all these swellings one by one. Simple goiter, which is a euthyroid goiter. One is diffuse hyperplastic goiter. There are three types: physiological, pubertal, and pregnancy goiter. Second variety is multinodular goiter. Then toxic goiter. In toxic goiter, you have three varieties. One is diffuse toxic goiter. The example is Graves' disease. Second is multinodular toxic goiter. And third is toxic adenoma. Then we have neoplastic swellings. Of course, the varieties are benign and malignant. Next group of swellings are inflammatory swellings. We classify these inflammatory swellings according to this autoimmune thyroiditis. One is chronic lymphocytic thyroiditis. Second is Hashimoto's disease. Second is granulomatous thyroiditis, and the example is de Quervain's thyroiditis. Next is fibrosing thyroiditis, and the example is Riedel's thyroiditis. Next variety is infective thyroiditis. As we know that in infective lesions, there are two types, acute and chronic. Amongst acute, bacterial thyroiditis, viral thyroiditis, subacute thyroiditis, and amongst chronic, there are tubercular thyroiditis and syphilitic thyroiditis. In other group, amyloid thyroiditis is the example. Let us see what is hypothyroidism. It is the hyperfunction of the thyroid gland. There are two varieties. When there is a severe variety of hypothyroidism, and second variety is what you very commonly clinically see, a milder variety of hypothyroidism. Classification or the causes of hypothyroidism can be classified as autoimmune thyroiditis, iatrogenic thyroiditis, dyshormonogenesis, goitrogens, secondary to pituitary and hypothalamic diseases, then thyroid agenesis and endemic cretinism. Autoimmune thyroiditis is divided into two types. One is non-goitrous, which is called as primary myxedema. It is definitely a very severe variety of thyroid hypofunction. Second is goitrous hypothyroidism. due to autoimmune diseases. The example is Hashimoto's disease. Then iatrogenic. After thyroidectomy, if the maximum thyroid tissue is excised, leaving behind the inadequate tissue to secrete the thyroid hormones which are needed by the body, can result in iatrogenic thyroiditis, uh, hypothyroidism. Then after radioiodine therapy, again, if the dose is more, if the major tissue mass is treated with radioiodine therapy, it can result in iatrogenic hypothyroidism. Then drugs such as antithyroid drugs, para-aminosalicylic acid, and iodine given in excess can also result in iatrogenic hypothyroidism. Dyshormonogenesis. Here, the genetic deficiencies The genetic deficiencies in the enzymes controlling the synthesis of thyroid hormones account for a minority cases of neonatal hypothyroidism and goiter. It means there are various other enzymes which are required for the synthesis of the thyroid hormones, and if there are deficiencies of those hormones, naturally they will result in the deficiency of thyroid hormones secreted by the thyroid gland. Then there are few substances which are called as goitrogens. We know that the vegetables of the Brassica family, such as cabbage, kale, they contain thiocyanate. Then drugs like para-aminosalicylic acid and antithyroid drugs again, they are acting as goitrogens. Thiocyanates and perchlorates, they interfere with iodine trapping, which is the first step of the thyroid hormone synthesis. Then carbimazole and thiouresyl compounds interfere with the oxidation of iodide and binding of iodine to tyrosine. Then another cause which is secondary to pituitary and hypothalamic diseases. There are various causes of pituitary and hypothalamic hypofunction which are responsible for hypofunction of the thyroid in turn. Thyroid agenesis. Complete or near complete failure of thyroid development results in sporadic cretinism. So that is seen in those individuals where there is a failure of the thyroid development. Partial failure causes juvenile myxedema. Then second is endemic cretinism. In cretinism, cretinism is common and is due to maternal and fetal iodine deficiency. Immediate diagnosis and treatment with thyroxine within a few days of birth are essential for normal physical and mental development. In this diagram, you can see a cretin woman who is aged 22 years, who is mentally and physically retarded with pot belly, umbilical hernia, dry and wrinkled skin, and supraclavicular pad of fats. The second variety, which is very commonly seen, is adult hypothyroidism. There are two types. The more severe thyroid failure is labeled as myxedema. Second is mild thyroid deficiency, which is more commonly seen in clinical practice. See, this is a photograph of a woman who is a case of myxedema. On her facial expressions, you can very easily diagnose that it is a case of myxedema. Signs and symptoms of hypothyroidism are accentuated in myxedema. Facial appearance is very typical. Supraclavicular puffiness, malar flush, and yellow tinge to the skin is seen in such patients. Then altered mental state, hypothermia, and precipitating medical conditions like cardiac failure or infections, which carry a very high mortality. Primary myxedema is considered to be an autoimmune disease similar to Hashimoto's disease. Treatment consists of thyroid replacement. There is something called as myxedema coma, which is a very severe condition and which needs immediate hospitalization, correction of dehydration, and various other things. Signs and symptoms of thyroid deficiency. On clinical examination, you can very easily suspect the diagnosis of hypothyroidism. Signs are bradycardia, cold extremities, dry skin and hair, periorbital puffiness, which is a very typical of hypothyroidism, then hoarseness of voice in late stages, bradykinesis, which means slowed movements, slowing of movements, then delayed relaxation phase of ankle jerks. Symptoms, patients can come with the complaints of tiredness, mental lethargy, cold intolerance, weight gain, which is typically seen irrespective of lowered appetite. When the appetite is lower, still the weight gain is seen. Constipation, menstrual disturbances, carpal tunnel syndrome, and usually these women present with infertility. Comparison of a facial appearance with a previous photograph may be useful in arriving at a diagnosis. Then delayed relaxation of the ankle jerk reflex is the useful clinical sign. When you want to suspect hypothyroidism in OPD, when still the reports of investigations are not available, you can just see the ankle jerk reflex and there will be delayed relaxation, which can help you to come to the diagnosis. Because rest of the complaints like tiredness, drowsiness, disinterest, weight gain can be seen in many other conditions also. Treatment of hypothyroidism in general. Textbooks mention only hormone replacement, that is T4 is given once daily. An average replacement dose is 150 micrograms and a suppressive dose is 200 micrograms. T3 is given 3 times daily, usually as a suppressive dose of 20 micrograms and 3 times a day. But we can consider some other supportive measures like weight reduction, which can help to some extent, though it is not included in textbooks, but that is your clinical experience will say that it helps to the patients. Weight reduction, reduction in the dietary fats and glucose, regular exercise, stress management, these can be considered as supportive treatment. Let us come to hyperthyroidism, that is called as thyrotoxicosis also. The term thyrotoxicosis is retained because symptoms due to raised thyroid hormones are not responsible for the manifestation of the disease. There are various clinical types of thyrotoxicosis. One is diffuse toxic goiter, which is called as Graves' disease. Second is toxic nodular goiter. Third is toxic nodule. And fourth is hyperthyroidism due to rare causes. Let us see about Graves' disease, which is a diffuse toxic goiter. Here, there is a diffuse vascular goiter which appears at the same time with hyperthyroidism. It means the swelling, the goiter, and hyperthyroidism both appear simultaneously. It is commonly seen in younger women. It is associated mostly with eye signs. It is a primary thyrotoxicosis. 50% of the patients have a family history of autoimmune endocrine diseases. This is a photograph of a woman having Graves' disease. You can see there is a goiter in the neck, which is diffusely enlarged swelling. The eyeballs are prominent. There is a typical name for these eyeballs in thyrotoxicosis or Graves' disease. It is called as exophthalmos. Whole of the functioning thyroid tissue is involved in this. Hypertrophy and hyperplasia are due to abnormal thyroid stimulating antibodies. Hypertrophy and hyperplasia are due to abnormal thyroid stimulating antibodies which bind to TSH receptor sites and produce a disproportionate and prolonged effect. Another variety is toxic nodular goiter. Here in this case, a simple nodular goiter may be present for a longer time, which is euthyroid. There is no presentation of hyperthyroidism. A simple nodular goiter is present for a long time before the hyperthyroidism, usually seen in middle-aged or elderly patients. Eye signs are not seen frequently except for lid lag and lid spasm. The syndrome is that of secondary thyrotoxicosis. Here is a photograph of a patient having multinodular toxic goiter. In many cases, nodules are inactive and internodular thyroid tissue is overactive. In some cases, one or more nodules are overactive. Hyperthyroidism is due to autonomous thyroid tissue as in toxic adenoma. Next variety of thyrotoxicosis is toxic nodule. Either there can be a real solitary overactive nodule in real sense, or which can be a part of generalized nodularity or a true toxic adenoma. It is autonomous and its hypertrophy and hyperplasia are not due to thyroid stimulating hormones receptor antibodies, which is in contrast to the Graves' disease, where mostly it's because thyroid stimulating hormone receptor antibodies activation. TSH secretion is suppressed by high levels of circulating thyroid hormones, and the normal thyroid tissue surrounding the nodule is itself suppressed and inactive. Clinical features of hyperthyroidism. Symptoms can be tiredness, emotional lability, heat intolerance, weight loss, excessive appetite, and palpitation. See the are different in hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. There is a cold intolerance in hypothyroidism, heat intolerance in hyperthyroidism. There is a weight gain in hypothyroidism and weight loss in hyperthyroidism. There is increased appetite in hyperthyroidism and decreased appetite in hypothyroidism. Signs of thyrotoxicosis. In this photograph, you can see a very frightening staring look, a very classical photograph of exophthalmos. In signs of thyrotoxicosis, you can find tachycardia, hot and moist palms, exophthalmos which is very typical. Very much agitated. Then there is the thyroid goiter, which has a bruit. If we want to compare between the primary thyrotoxicosis and secondary thyrotoxicosis, see, these questions are asked in your practical examination when you are given a case of thyroid swelling or in your grand viva. In primary thyrotoxicosis, goiter is always diffuse and vascular. In secondary, goiter is nodular. In primary, onset is sudden and abrupt, whereas in thyrotoxicosis, it is slow and insidious. In primary thyrotoxicosis, goiter is firm or soft. In secondary thyrotoxicosis, it is nodular. In primary, bruit and thrill may be present. In secondary, it may be absent. In primary, hyperthyroidism is more severe. In secondary, hyperthyroidism is mild. In primary, CNS is the most commonly involved system. Eye signs are commonly seen. As against this, in secondary thyrotoxicosis, CVS is more commonly involved. It presents with cardiac failure or arterial fibrillation. Eye signs are rare except lid lag and lid spasm. Primary thyrotoxicosis is seen at early age and secondary is seen in middle age. Treatment of hyperthyroidism. There are three types of treatment modalities available for this. One is antithyroid drugs, second is surgical treatment, and third is radioiodine therapy. Let us come to antithyroid drugs. One group is carbimazole. The dose is 10 milligram 6 hourly and the maintenance dose is 10 milligram either BD or TDS. Then propylthiouracil, beta adrenergic blockers like propranolol, novolol, and the dose is 10 to 20 milligrams BD or TDS. Next group is iodides. Lugol's iodine is given to reduce the vascularity of the gland before surgery, and the dose is 10 to 12 drops TDS for 10 days before the surgery. Let us see what are the advantages and disadvantages of the antithyroid drugs. Advantages are surgery is not required, then use of the radioactive materials can be avoided. Amongst disadvantages of antithyroid drugs, this treatment is a prolonged treatment. Failure rate is seen in 50% of the patients. It is very difficult to predict which patients are likely to go into permanent remissions. And when the size of the gland is large, when disease is very severe, and when the levels of the TSH receptor antibodies are high, they indicate poor prognosis with the antithyroid treatment. Second is surgical treatment. In diffuse toxic goiter and toxic nodular goiter with overactive internodular tissue, surgery cures by reducing the mass of the overactive tissue. Definitely, it will help in appearance of the patient also, cosmetic benefit. Cure is possible if the thyroid tissue can be reduced below a critical mass. Let us see what are the advantages. One is goiter is removed, the swelling is removed. Second is cure is very rapid. During surgery itself, as soon as the thyroid mass is removed, the circulating thyroid hormone levels fall down and hyperthyroidism starts getting managed. Cure rate is very high if the surgery is adequate. Disadvantages of the surgery are recurrence of the thyrotoxicosis is seen in 5% of the cases. What are the risk factors of the surgery? One is post-operative thyroid insufficiency is seen in 20 to 40% of the cases. Then long-term follow-up is necessary for recurrence and thyroid failure. In some patients, that is 0.5% of the patients, parathyroid insufficiency can be seen. Let us come back to the complications of the surgery. Like any other surgery, thyroid surgery also has got its own complications. One is hemorrhage, reactionary hemorrhage, and tension hematoma. Respiratory obstruction because of the tension hematoma, and which compresses the larynx. Next is laryngeal nerve paralysis. Then permanent hypothyroidism because of the excessive thyroid tissue removal. Permanent hypoparathyroidism by inadvertently excised parathyroid glands along with the thyroid. There is something called as thyrotoxic crisis or storm. It occurs in patients with primary thyrotoxicosis. During surgery, due to handling of the gland, there is a sudden release of thyroxine into the systemic circulation, which can result in thyrotoxic crisis. A very severe picture of thyrotoxicosis. Here you will see hyperpyrexia, temperature goes above 105 degrees Fahrenheit. There is excessive sweating, gross dehydration, which can result in hypovolemic shock, tachycardia, wound infection, hypertrophied scar, and stitch granuloma are other complications of the thyroid surgery. Then third treatment modality which is available is radioiodine therapy. Radioiodine destroys thyroid cells. As seen in thyroidectomy, it reduces the mass of functioning thyroid tissue below a critical level. Advantages of radioiodine are surgery is not required, no prolonged treatment is required, but the disadvantages are isotope facilities must be available at all the places. Another group of swellings in the region of thyroid or from the thyroid is neoplasms of the thyroid gland. There are two types. One is benign tumors. The common variety is adenoma. Second is malignant tumors, and the varieties are papillary carcinoma, follicular carcinoma, anaplastic carcinoma, medullary carcinoma, and malignant lymphoma. These are the references. Because of the restricted time, I could not cover thyroid tumors. And before ending my lecture, I would like to tell you that thyroid is again a very important topic. You can get long questions, short questions, MCQs. You can always get a patient with thyroid swelling in your practical examination. So please be prepared with this topic thoroughly. Thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my views. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for your this wonderful session and like sharing of this knowledge. Really, even I enjoyed this lecture. I will request Dr. Atul Deshpande sir to start with your lecture. Before that, I will love to introduce you, Dr. Atul Deshpande sir. He's a senior faculty member from CS MSS Dental College, Aurangabad. Sir, I will request you to share your PowerPoint and start with your lecture.